I have lots of investors that we've done stuff for that are moving their money out of Dade County, that are moving their money out of New York, and they're parking it right here in Tampa Bay because everything in Southeast Florida is too expensive. Everything in Southwest Florida is too expensive. Nobody wants to be in Jacksonville. Sorry. And it's coming here. People are coming from up north and from out west with straight cash money because their stuff out there is worth $800,000-$900,000, and our stuff is still worth $4 or $5. So whatever they're selling, they're bringing straight cash here, and they're buying it straight cash, and that's what you're up against.
You're listening to Copeland Morgan Media, your source for investment property analysis, education, and advice. Find us online at copelandmorgan.com. Our guest today, who I'm super pleased to have in the studio, is Glenn Fricke. Glenn is the owner of two local companies, both DG Inspekts, which is a local home inspection company, and URBN Domains, which is a local general contractor and home builder. Glenn, on that note, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, and I'm curious, are there any other business enterprises that you're into that I don't know about?
Yeah, well, we have our pest control license through the Florida Department of Agriculture to do the termite inspection portion of things to kind of keep us as like a one-stop shop. So we have that. It's just a DBA under our main corporation. Right. So we don't really do a lot of like general household pest control. We'll do some spot treatments on termites here or there if we find it. If the real estate agent needs it cleaned up or something, we can go out and take care of that if it's something small or minor that we feel we can handle appropriately. But yeah, other than that, it's just basically those two, and then the third one just to keep us legal under the state laws. Cool.
Well, yeah, and that is it's a huge benefit actually. I remember back before I started working with you guys, I would have to schedule one person for the home inspection. Sometimes you would have to schedule a different person for the 4-point because not everybody did 4 points back then. And then you would have to schedule a pest control company for the termite inspection. And, as you can imagine, as busy as we are as real estate agents and brokers and investors and landlords, trying to schedule one appointment is hard enough. But you're trying to schedule 2 or 3 during that inspection period. So for what it's worth, one of the things I've always loved about working with you guys is the fact that you do it all. You're a one-stop shop. You can take care of the home inspection, the 4-point, the termite, as well as some ancillary inspections and things like that, which we can talk about a little more in a minute. So I've been working with you for years. Jointly, we must have done at least 100 home inspections over that period of time. How many home inspections would you say that you have personally done over the years? It's got to be thousands, right?
Yeah, it's definitely thousands. I mean, we average as a company, at least for the last, 2022, so I'd say the last 5 or 6 years, I mean, we've been running anywhere between 900 to 1,200 a year, with myself probably doing a third of that since then. So yeah, I mean, just the last 6 years I've probably got $2,000,
right?
And that's
so you've seen it all
between that. Yeah no, it gets become highly repetitive after a while. It's just the same stuff in a different package, right, at a different location.
On that note, that was actually one of my questions. Is there like a most common problem or a recurring theme that you see with properties here in Florida in terms of inspection issues?
I would say it's not even necessarily inspection issues. I think it's the way I could put it is it's locality driven, basically depending on what area of town and when it was the year built out, you're going to start seeing, the same problems. If you go over to the areas of East Tampa, Brandon stuff there, or even Carrollwood and stuff that was built out in the 90s, you run into polybutylene piping there. You run into the bad siding products that they had. You run into the gray Alflex plastic ductwork. If you're talking about St. Petersburg, Florida, which was built out in the 50s and 60s, you run into a lot of just older stuff, older electric panels, cast iron sewer drains, which are quickly becoming at the end of their life that are giving people, a lot of problems. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily one common thing. I think the largest things that you run into would typically be electrical problems and roofing problems.
Sure.
If you were to say what are the two most common things, because there tend to be the two most common things that the average homeowner
Cares about.
doesn't focus, well, not doesn't care about, but that doesn't focus on. You're not getting up on your roof every year to make sure that the squirrels haven't chewed your, vent pipes off, or that, you've got a shingle that blew off, during the strong storm. So, and it's the same with the electrical. The average person's just relying on, if you have people coming in to do stuff, you're just assuming they're doing it right, and they're typically not. So,
right. So it's more like these are things that your average homeowner doesn't discover until they go to sell their house.
Right.
And then, oh, by the way, did you know you had a roof leak at the flashing? Did you know you've got aluminum wiring going to your dryer or whatever?
Yeah.
So,
if your sink drain's leaking in your cabinet, you're going to know. There's just, you know what I mean? There's your toilet starts not flushing right. You're going to know, it's those type of things. So.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, too, about the geography of it. I know for many years some of the builds over in the South Tampa or South Shore area had like Chinese drywall. And so it's funny how there's different localities that were built out at different times, which results in like common themes for different neighborhoods or different regions. That's an interesting point that I had never really thought about. So this is more of a fun question. What's the strangest thing you've ever encountered during a home inspection?
Yeah, I get that question asked a lot. I really don't know that I've ever encountered anything strange. I've had, like mama raccoons in a crawl space that I wasn't anticipating when you stick your head in there. I've had boxes of adult toys in an attic before. You don't poke your head up there and expect to find that there. But that, yeah, I guess that, but those are kind of just off the wall things. But yeah, I don't know that I've ever had anything, or that we've ever heard of anything that's been strange. I've had sellers threaten to shoot me in the head. That's been strange. But, you're dealing with people. So, you get a lot of different characters, but.
That actually happened to me once during a home inspection too. The guy was threatening to shoot us.
Right.
Turns out he only had a BB gun, but he talked a good game. I found a mummified cat in a crawl space once. That was interesting.
Yeah, I've seen the remains, not mummified.
No, this one like had the
skeletons.
Skin and everything. It was like a mummy.
Disgusting.
What about like, is there a worst property ever that you can remember? Like, oh my goodness, that's got to take the cake for the worst one ever. You guys have like an annual award ceremony or something?
It's not really an annual award. I can honestly say, I started when the market was at the absolute worst in '08. And it slowly came up. 2012 was kind of right when the market started to kind of get its legs underneath of it and continue again. We really had 4 years of not much action, a lot anyway.
What a wild ride, though, from 2008 to 2022. So.
Yeah, but there was one client in particular. I'll never forget it. She was a very short person, not like a
not a little person,
not a little person, but she's a very, very short person, and she was dead set on finding the most valued, cheapest fixer-upper she could find. But she didn't really have any skills or understanding of how to do it. So she was constantly picking out these, dumpster fire houses to inspect. And I remember there was one, and I just can't forget it. It was if you're heading down 16th Street, right when you cross over 22nd Ave South, there's like a lake just a couple of blocks back there. And it was a house. It probably would have been like 26th Avenue South and like 17th Street.
That's just Lake Magori, right?
I think it's the northern very tip of Lake Magori there. And it was just, I can't even describe it. It had a wooden pool cage. The house hadn't been lived in, and it was, I think, a remnant from the foreclosure era that just slipped through the cracks forever. The ceiling had caved in. There was mold everywhere. Like I said, the pool cage was wooden. Somebody had DIY'd a wooden pool cage, and it was all rotted out. Like part of it fell into the pool. The pole was, a moat of green slime, and it just was, I mean, it just, for whatever reason, I don't know why that one place just sticks out in my head as like the worst place I've ever been. And live and learn nowadays, if we pull up to something like that, I've quit jobs on the spot and just said, you don't need us. Just, you need a
bulldozer.
You either need a really good GC or you need to just plan on tearing this place down, and we just walk away from, because there's just no point in.
And that's you bring up a great point there, because I know we've talked about this, offline in the past, but people hire you to inspect these downtrodden properties or whatever you want to call them, and then a year later they want to call you and try to hold you accountable because you inspected it and didn't tell them this little tiny detail or whatever. I know it's tricky to point out all the defects, but you can only see so much as a home inspector, and so I imagine that's challenging on some of these rougher properties. Is how many pages can your inspection report be?
Well, honestly, it's actually really the opposite. I find that the people that typically put offers or want to buy those rougher properties kind of know what they're getting into. We have comments like, hey, this is a fixer-up, or not everything you're going to see is in the report, stuff like that. So we honestly haven't really had any huge problems with people buying those types of properties, because they realize they're getting a deal. They know that they're going to need to put work into it. Those things typically tend to be more visual, because you're looking at what the problems are. They're not typically hidden. They're out in plain sight. It's the things that people don't understand about what a home inspection is and isn't, is to where the real problems come from, in that they think this process is going to save them from any and all thing that could happen whatsoever, and it's just not the case. Orangeburg Pipes in your backyard, which were basically used in the war era, they were cardboard just dipped in tar. Things like that we can't see, but people don't understand that. Sure. Those types of things tend to really be the problem, and it's kind of a situation where, like, unlike a lot of businesses, you don't get the chance to set expectations for people ahead of time. They're calling you to hire, you show up, you do your job, and you send it out, but you can't.
You don't have X-ray vision.
You don't have X-ray vision. People don't understand really what it is we do real well, because it's really such a niche thing that you only need it at a certain point, and then it's done, and then you don't need it again for
I'm sure there's
10
many
or 12
people that
years.
got a home inspection once in their life.
Yeah. And so it just it's a mystery to a lot of people, and they don't understand it. And I think that's where the disconnect comes in, is after the fact, when they move in and they start having problems due to age or obsolescence,
normal problems
or things
that every
hidden.
homeowner is going to have.
Yeah, but that they just didn't, they think that getting that home inspection is going to save them from any and everything for the next 5 years. It's just not the way it is. And there's people that understand that and have realistic expectations. There's a lot of people that don't have any expectations, and it's just because we have a lot of first-time home buyers, and newer, that younger age is now getting to the point where they're buying houses for the first time, and we kind of didn't have a whole lot of that, up until the last couple of years.
Sure. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question. So buyers have a lot of decisions to make about home inspections, namely, like, which inspections do we need to include? What do we need to pay for? Do we really need a sewer line scope or a radon testing or mold testing? In your experience, what's kind of the baseline in terms of the minimum suite of inspections that a buyer should always have? And then secondary to that, when are some of these specialty inspections, warranted or needed?
Well, I can honestly say, the one you always want to get is, and that's the one everybody's going to get, is a pre-purchase inspection. That's just where, you're going to go in, you're going to just get a second set of eyes on things. You're going to get probably the little better idea of kind of what the age and condition of, like, your big ticket things here in Florida are going to be, your roof, the age of your air conditioning system. And it's just going to basically be a basic check of function of the house. Are windows opening? Are they closing? Do lights turn on? Do they turn off? Things like that. Things that you can't do when you go in to just look at a house. You're doing a different checkbox or a checklist when you're doing that than what you're doing during that. So it's just to give you a little bit more information on what you're buying. You're trading a small sum of money for a little bit more information, and that's the crux of what it is. And I think that's where the confusion comes in. As to what other things people need as far as specialty, that's really up to you and your comfort level with what you're buying. I would probably say we used to do sewer line inspections, sewer scope inspections. We got out of doing it just because, similar to what I said before, people don't understand the expectations. We would only do the main sewer line itself. So that's typically a 3-inch line that runs from your house out to where the city connection is. So we're either going to access that through the roof on where the main vent comes down and runs out to the yard, or if there's a clean out somewhere, in the yard, and do that. But unfortunately, that isn't all your drain lines in your house. You're going to have toilets, you're going to have lines running laterally underneath your slab in your house, things like that. Typically, you can only get those by pulling toilets up, things like that. There's certain limitations, as you know, from the FAR Park contract of what we can and can't do. It's a visual only. So we just had too many problems with people not reading their agreement ahead of time to understand what our scope of work is and what we're doing. But yeah, I would strongly say, especially here in Florida, because, and especially in St. Pete, most of our properties were built out in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we have a lot of old cast iron drain lines here. A lot of cast
iron, a lot of Orangeburg, a lot of clay pipe still in some places.
I would like to think most of the Orangeburg has failed out by now, and it's been discovered.
I was going to say, I still find it all the time because it fails.
There's still some of it around. We've had people that have it, but yeah, if it is in place by now, it's failing, trust me, and they're finding out. But yeah, the source scope inspection, I would strongly recommend. I usually say it's probably best to have a plumber do it. And the only reason why is that there's so many subjectivities to that, as far as the cast iron and the scaling goes. Or are they going to recommend? A plumber's job is to make money, period, point blank. So if we send the source scope down and we don't see any damage to the pipes, we're going to say, hey, everything's working good. Yeah, it's got some scale in it, blah, blah, blah. But you never know. The homeowner's going to move in. They may be flushing weird stuff down the toilet. It's going to get caught on some of that scale, and the plumber's going to come out and say, oh, this should have been hydrojetted or this or that. So I would probably always say just let a plumber do that, because and there's a lot of home inspectors that do it. There's probably a bunch that are good at it. But again, the plumber's job is to sell plumbing work, and they're going to sell it to you either there, or they're going to sell it to you a year from now when you start having a plumbing problem, and then you're looking at your home inspector like, well, you didn't tell me that. That's just part of the name of the game. So yeah, I would definitely recommend one of those. Radon testing, not a lot of radon. We are licensed for radon through the State Department of Health. There is a lot of radon over in the eastern and southeastern area, Hillsborough County, just because of the phosphate mines over there. Phosphate as a mineral, as it's mined from the soil, is inherently directly linked to uranium. They actually have giant stacks of uranium sitting over there. And one, I don't know if anybody remembers, it's like 2 years ago, a sinkhole opened up under one and it sent a ton of uranium into our groundwater supply.
That's not good.
So out that way, definitely need to get radon. There is, radon mitigation systems even out there, and, Riverview and those areas, Brandon, et cetera. Not really much in St. Petersburg.
Yeah, I have literally never seen a radon test done in St. Pete or even this part of Tampa. I don't do a whole lot of business down in Brandon and the South Shore area.
Yeah, and mold. One of those things. Realistically, I mean, a house isn't really going to have an inherent mold problem unless there's really a source of moisture in food. So, I mean, if you've got a house that's disclosed that it's flooded, or things like that. Might be wise to do it. Otherwise, the typical normal house, unless there's some sort of moisture source that's causing a problem that you can identify readily, shouldn't typically have, an extreme mold problem.
Yeah, we run into that all the time with tenants who think they have mold. And it's like, you can't have a serious mold infestation unless you have a continual and constant source of water leak. So if there's no leak, there's probably no mold
or humidity. Yeah, or you're not running your AC. I mean, we have tenants that don't run their AC during the summer to save electric, and then mold starts growing on their shoes and their clothes and their furniture because it's too humid. The water's condensing out of the air and it's just growing on the dust and stuff that's living in your house, and then they have huge mold problems.
And going back to the sewer line scope, this is both for you and for any listeners who are looking for one. I've had a very good experience with A Stone Plumbing out of Tampa. There's a guy there named Xavier who does their sewer line scopes. It's really good, got really good equipment to, give you video of it, mark, locate whatever you need to done with the sewer lines. And so that's who we've been using for sewer scopes is A Stone Plumbing. One thing we didn't talk about yet was the 4-point inspection. And we work with a lot of out-of-state buyers who are interested in investing in Florida. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the 4-point inspection is really just a Florida thing. And most people from out of state have never heard of it. What is it? How did it come about here in Florida? And what's its purpose?
Its original purpose was kind of centered around the formation of Citizens Property Insurance when it started coming about and started taking on more policies after the bad hurricane seasons that we had in 04, 05, and 06 when Citizens really grew because so many companies went belly up because of the regulatory problems that we had with not letting companies keep enough money in the bank to pay for hurricanes. They just never envisioned for hurricanes here. That was typically a requirement mostly of Citizens. There were some other companies that wanted it, and it really fell into the lap of just older houses. So they really wanted it on a house that was 50 years old or over, and they just really wanted to make sure that the house had some sort of updates to it, that it wasn't a fuse panel, that it was a more modern breaker style panel, that the roofs were in generally good condition. They typically were just finding that, older houses just weren't kept up as well as more newer ones. And since that time, it's kind of been gradually morphing. They've dropped the requirements of that, the companies. It was 30 years now. A lot of them have changed it now. In 2022, it's 20 years. They want a 4-point inspection. The age of the house. If it's 20 years or older, they're going to want a 4-point inspection. Just similar to the name, it looks at 4 things: the roof, electric, plumbing, and the air conditioning, the condition of them, if they're working, any potential hazards that may be present that could, cause a electric fire or shock somebody or things like that. You don't want they don't want to insure a roof that's currently got leaks or one that's really, really, really old, because they know those are going to fail out or they're going to start having problems when strong weather comes along. So that's what a 4-point is. It is, like you said, Florida specific. There's no other states really out there that do them. And it's been here and it's here to stay. And it's just not going anywhere.
For our out-of-state folks who are listening, what that often means for the buyer is, if you're used to operating in Georgia, New York, or somewhere else, you pay for a home inspection. Home inspector gives you a home inspection report, and that's kind of it. But here in Florida, you don't want to forget to also pay for or order the 4-point inspection. It looks at a lot of the same stuff that the full-blown inspection report does, but you need that specifically formatted form, the Citizens 4-point inspection form, to give to your insurance company and in order to bind coverage. And I'll even add another caveat to that is if you get a 4-point and there's some deficiencies on it, you probably want to get those corrected and get a clean 4-point and then give the clean 4-point to your insurance company, because there's really no point in giving them a bad 4-point. It's not going to help you bind your insurance coverage. But like I said, it's usually stuff you're already looking at, but it's just a second specially formatted report that the buyer has to pay for.
Yep.
And their insurance company is almost certainly going to require it unless it's a new build or less than 20 years old.
Right. Yeah. State Farm wants them. State Farm is writing again in Florida. They have been for a couple of years. They want them at 10 years. That's the only kind of off weird kilter company out there that we don't get a whole lot of State Farm requests from people because they don't write a whole lot of insurance. They're pretty strict on what they will accept, but they are out there. So they want it at 10 years, but everything else is typically 20, 30, depending.
Cool. So I wanted to talk a little bit about who does and who should show up for the home inspection. I've had buyers out of state or whatever who don't even attend the inspection. They get the report, they review it with their agent, and that's that. At the other end of the spectrum, I've had buyers show up with like an entourage and coffee and donuts and bring their mom and their dad and their aunt and their uncle. What do you think is the best way for a buyer to participate in the home inspection process without getting in your way or derailing the inspection process?
Yeah. Well, again, like you said, it's all about where they're located. If they're buying it sight unseen from New York and planning on moving down, they're obviously not going to attend. So they're kind of out of luck there. But if you get a chance to attend the inspection, most all inspectors out there are going to recommend that you do come, because typically at the end they're going to go over a lot of the bigger things that you're going to see in the report. They're going to kind of explain it a little bit better to you if you don't have a whole lot of familiarity with a house and how the systems work. You can kind of get an idea of what's going on, what it means, the severity of it, so that when you do end up getting that report back and going through it, you're going to understand a little better about, what you're seeing on the report and what was kind of verbally relayed to you there at the inspection. Typically don't recommend bringing your friends and really extended family to that time. We've had that happen before. We get people getting pulled away by family members, when we're trying to explain things, oh, look at this, look at that, notice things, and then they're not paying attention to what we're trying to walk them through at the end. It tends to add a lot of time to it. Parents, there's always like a running joke about the home buyer's dad showing up to the home inspection. I think every real estate agent and home inspector has a meme buried somewhere, has seen one about that. But
I had one where the buyers and I think some of their entourage, they were up on the roof with the home inspector.
We've had that.
I was just cringing. I'm like, one of these people gets hurt.
Yep,
this is not going to end well.
Yeah, I've thrown them off, not literally thrown them off, but yeah, I've had them, like, I'll be up on the roof and I'll turn around and there's the buyer's dad like standing right on the roof next to him. I'm like, hey man, you can't be up here, you fall, you're going to end up suing me. Right. That's just the way it is. But if you don't have a lot of knowledge and your parents do, there's no problem with bringing that, so that maybe they can help you kind of comprehend what it is you're looking at. But yeah, don't bring the whole posse over at that point in time. There's a time and place for that. Do that once you close on the property. But certainly attend, certainly ask questions, when it's time. Try to let the inspector or whoever you hire do their job, because they typically have a set routine that they go through in their head. We have a really short window of time that we're trying to kind of look at the property and try to find little signs of things that may be bigger problems. And when you're kind of constantly bothering the inspectors, it takes them out of that routine. And so then they have to kind of flip a light switch on and off constantly. Okay, I got to get back to this. What was I doing? Where was I at? Did I do this? Did I do that? You're going to forget stuff. It happens. So, wait till the end. Ask them questions. It's a good way to learn, and it's recommended that you do get there, because it saves a lot of back end stuff too. Because then when you don't attend, you're seeing a report, you don't understand what the stuff means. You're seeing pictures, you're seeing words, and then you usually end up having to, phone afterwards, which isn't a big deal. That's just customer service. But if you can make it, make it.
Yeah, I think probably a best practice is for the buyer to view the home inspection. Of course, it's an opportunity for you to see the property and spend a little more time inside the property than you could during a 10-minute showing. But at the same time, it's generally not a best practice to follow the inspector around. In my experience, if you find something wrong or something that's a major red flag, you're going to flag us down. You're going to pull us over. Hey, I need to show you this. And so there's really no need to follow around the home inspector. You take the time to spend a little more time looking at the house, and then you're going to get the debrief at the end from the inspector. And to your point, that is invaluable, because there's nothing worse than getting a 17-page written report and trying to figure out, is this really bad or is this just normal, but having the opportunity to go through it and look at those photos or whatever with the inspector on site, it can go a long way towards kind of putting your mind at ease. Like, I'm gonna write this stuff up in the report because these are my observations, but that doesn't mean that the sky is falling or the house is falling. There's a lot of normal deferred maintenance and just age-related conditions with properties, and that doesn't mean it's a deal killer or a safety issue or anything like that. And you're certainly going to call us over and point those out, in my experience. And kind of a corollary to that question is realtor participation. I'm sure there are plenty of real estate agents listening, and I'm just curious, from your perspective as a home inspector, what do you look for from the real estate agents involved in a transaction, and how can they best facilitate the inspection process?
Well, I think the best thing that a realtor can do, if I was a realtor and going through this process and flipping roles, is you want to. It's probably the worst case circumstance as it relates to real estate, because if there's one thing that's an emotional buy, it is a house. It's that and a car. I mean, those are your two. They're not logical choices typically. They're purely emotion. You're looking at the neighborhood, the school district. Is there a pool? Are you in love with it? Do you love the kitchen? Do you love this? Can you see yourself? You're going through this whole emotional roller coaster of, excuse me, putting yourself in that house. And this is kind of the one spot where fantasy meets reality. And so preparing your clients for that ahead of time. And number one, going back to what I originally said earlier, is to build the expectation that this isn't going to be the catch-all, be-all for this house. You're going to move in, your air conditioner is going to flood your house, when the drain line backs up, et cetera. You have to let them know, hey, this is just a little better opportunity to learn some information about this and kind of what you're getting into. And then number two is prepare them that there's going to be stuff they're going to find on here that's going to be typically normal stuff for a lived-in house. Every lived-in house is going to have stuff come up on the home inspection, and it's just really understanding what's severe and what's not, or what they really need to focus on and what they shouldn't. And I think from a real estate standpoint, you probably have to have a working knowledge of houses would probably be a good thing. Owning a house is probably, I'm not saying you have to own a house to be a real estate agent, but understanding, what you're seeing in the home inspection as something that maybe we need to ask the sellers for this, or maybe we need to negotiate this, or maybe we need to bring in somebody from the outside to come in and do a little bit further research on this so we can understand a little better and maybe what the costs are going to be. That's really what, to me, the realtors should be doing.
Preparing the buyers,
preparing ahead of time.
And I would also add in there, make sure you have access. You can get into every room or every unit or whatever. And what about the seller? I mean, I generally think it's a best practice for the seller to go take a walk or something, because they have a tendency to kind of follow you around and tell you how great their house is, and that's not what's supposed to be happening today.
Yeah, well, that's a tricky question, and I'll say this: it really depends on the house. I think for the majority of cases, probably 90 to 95% of the houses out there, you're right. It is probably a good idea. Now, it's the seller's property; they can do whatever they want. So, but for any realtors out there, yes, get the sellers out of the freaking house, and it should be a 2.5 hour tops. It's all they need to be gone for. And that's kind of the time for the buyers to kind of do their diligence and just have that place to themselves. If it's a complex house, if it's got a lot of gas fireplaces, if it's got pool and irrigation equipment that are controlled via your app and your cell phone app only, have the sellers there. If it's a 7,000 square foot house, have the sellers there, because there's going to be a lot of just weird stuff. There's going to be an air handler in some weird place that we just don't know, behind a bookshelf that they have 4 hidden screws zipped in and you can't even see it. I mean, we've had that,
where I've been in that, where there's multi-zone AC and there's 17 different thermostats and you can't figure out how to turn on the AC, but there's 3 of them. Yeah.
So, I mean, in weird situations like that, where the pool equipment runs only by an app or the irrigation is only by an app, and they're out there, have the seller there, because that's going to help, the people that are trying to tell your buyer that things are functional. It's going to help that, that out in the long run and going through the inspection, as opposed to trying to get them on their cell phone and, hey, can you turn the hot tub on, while they're, up in Minnesota, or, trying to work it on their cell phone and they have no Wi-Fi up in the cabin or something. So
yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I imagine it's becoming more and more prevalent with smart homes and all the smart wireless technology we have in homes. And we all have it at home. You have 17 different remote controls, and only you and your son knows how to turn on the TV. And I can imagine that as that expands to other parts of the house, it's helpful to have somebody there that knows how to work all the gadgets. You mentioned something that I want to circle back to, and that was timing. And you mentioned, allow yourself enough time to bring in an additional expert, a contractor, a plumber, an electrician, or whatever, because you may be able to point out some potential red flags, but it's not really your job to give a repair estimate or a repair timeline and things like that. So I think certainly a best practice is if you have a 7-day or 10-day inspection period, try not to do your inspection on day 6 or day 9. Get it done as early as possible during your due diligence period so that you do have time to bring in additional experts or get second opinions or get estimates for repairs or whatever. And I thought that was a really good point. You mentioned this is an emotional thing, and the home inspection is where how did you phrase it? It's where fantasy meets reality.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you see a big difference between investor buyers and retail buyers when it comes to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, because an investor buyer is looking at what I said before, that the home purchase was an emotional purchase for most. It's not for anybody that's investing. They have no emotion in it whatsoever. They're not tied to it. They may be a little bit because, making money is a good emotion to have. But I think a lot of times they go into things having experience. So what they're seeing in front of them, they recognize already. If you're a first-time investor, then that's no different than a first-time buyer. But most investors are going to have the savvy, and so they're typically they're looking for the big-ticket things. Is the roof old? Does that need replaced? Or they're looking to rent it out, so they're really just wanting to get insurance on the place and just wanting to make sure that there's any hidden surprises with it that they may have. Like a huge rat infestation in the attic or things like that. So. The investors typically tend to be, I don't say better clients, but they're more knowledgeable, and they're not interested in
cosmetics.
They know the AC is going to break down in 3 months. It's just par for the course. So they're in it for the hard line, and that's it. So
and I find that in some cases, an investor may be planning to come in and gut the house anyway, or at least rip out the flooring and the cabinets, and they don't even care about the cosmetic stuff. It really almost becomes like a 4-point or a series of single-point inspections. Just tell me how much life is left in the roof. Is the HVAC any good? Is the electrical good? Is the plumbing good? Is the sewer line good? The rest of it I'm going to rip out anyway. So that's a very different perspective on the inspection. So I want to shift and talk about the construction side of things, but is there anything you would add as in words of wisdom or thoughts as it pertains to home inspections?
No real words of wisdom, but just know if you're going to be buying a house, make sure you got money in the bank, and you're going to have to know that you're going to spend it, because that's just the way it is. Stuff's going to happen. I mean, it stinks to say that, but it's not going to be your saving grace to avoid stuff going wrong. We had a client move in 15 days after they moved in. A pipe burst. The toilet line on the 90 behind the wall burst right off the fitting because I guess it wasn't sweated properly or something. They were away at work the whole day, flooded their whole freaking house. And of course, they call us up and say it's our fault, and I'm like, sorry, I don't want to hear that. It doesn't make me happy to get a call.
It's sad, but it's not your fault.
Yeah, to say that they're living in their RV in their driveway because they can't live in their house because it's flooded out. But when their plumber says, "Oh, this is the inspector's fault. They should have caught this," and then you're calling us, what am I supposed to tell you? I told them, "Hey, you're gonna have to get an attorney if you think we're." I'm not saying that's how we handle client problems, but in instances where it's out of our control. That's just the way it is. Yeah. But understand, you're going to have real problems with owning a house. So, unlike calling your landlord, you're the one that's got to deal with it, and not them. So make sure you just have a little extra money saved up in the bank, to deal with stuff as it comes up, so it doesn't really surprise you.
That's a great point. And on the investing side, we often tend to think in terms of annual cost. We annualize everything. The roof, it's going to cost you $10,000, but it's good for 20, 25 years.
Right.
And if you figure that out monthly, it might be $17 or $80 a month or whatever. And $80 a month is no big deal. And even, if you do that annual, it's not that much money. But the fact is, at some point in the next few years, you're going to have to fork out the $8 or $10K for the roof or the $5K for the HVAC system. And although you can sort of depreciate those and annualize the expenses, it still means that you need that 10 or 15K in the bank in order to absorb that when it comes up.
Yeah. And watch out for contractors too. Just to anybody listening, whether that's a newer real estate agent or a buyer or a seller. So I've been seeing just some ridiculous prices on stuff. I've been seeing a lot of electric panel swaps that have been in. That's basically where maybe you have an electric panel that's outdated and it needs to be replaced, or it's got too many problems, or it's too small, or whatever. I've been seeing electric panel swap outs in the $9,000 to $10,000 range, and I've been seeing them a lot.
Wow.
Which is not what those should cost, and it's because people just aren't shopping the service that's needed. They think it needs done right away, and by doing that, they're putting themselves in a position where they're contacting one company, and these tend to be I don't want to disparage them in any way, but it tends to be the larger franchise-based companies and the multi-service companies, to where they're doing plumbing, electrical, and AC all in one. They tend to be a little higher. So if you don't mind paying a high price, go ahead. But there's plenty of local, community-based, small family businesses,
licensed, legitimate,
that are still licensed,
workers,
that'll still do the same work. But it's not going to cost you $9,000 for an electric panel. Hey, if you want to pay $9,000 for an electric panel and they can get it done that day, there's some people that'll pay that all day, and that's fine. There's a price for every service, but understand, for the majority of people out there, that's not a realistic price.
You might want to wait till Monday and pay $3,000.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. There's just always understand that it's, get multiple, estimates and bids. Ask people for referrals. Don't just tie yourself into the first salesperson that shows up at your door.
Sure. Yeah, I think I mentioned that we had Kate Story on the show here recently, and that was one of the things we talked about, is the fact that those of us who have been working in this market for several years, we generally all tend to know and use and trust the same, somewhat same group of contractors and professionals. And I think all of us, hey, if you got an electrician who's going to do your electric panel for $10,000 and you're not sure if that's the right price, call me, call Glenn, call Kate, ask, hey, how much do you pay to get an electrical panel done? Now, I'll admit that sometimes we're a high volume customer because we do property management and we may get a preferred rate, but at the same time, there are certainly companies out there that will take advantage of the unwitting homeowner who's in a bind because their water heater's out and they need to take a shower, or their electrical panel is sparking and they think it's unsafe, which it may be, but you're right.
I joke I'm in the wrong business, because I say, look, I do 2 panel swaps a month at $10,000. I'm going to work Monday and Tuesday, the first of them and the second of the month, and I'm going to take 28 days off, and I'm not working into a fair margin. I'm going to make over $100,000 a year.
Right.
I think so, but
and I don't know if this is in defense of them or to their credit, but one of the problems that the big national franchise chains have is they have huge overhead expenses.
Yeah, and
that's the reason
fees
prices,
that they have to pay every month.
Prices are so high.
Yep.
And that's a great piece of advice to real estate investors, is find a local, licensed tradesperson, but somebody who's local, independent, and give them their business. They can usually beat out the big, national service chains by a huge margin, and they'll give you better service. And you can call them sometimes at 6 p.m. on a Friday night when you need them, and they'll actually answer the phone.
Yeah. Yep. The overhead is what kills it.
So that's a great segue into the construction side of things. You've got on your URBN Domains attire here, and I'm really interested to hear more about this because, frankly, I don't know that much about it. I've worked with you a lot as a home inspector. I know you're a general contractor. I know you've built some houses, but that's kind of all I know. So tell us about the construction side of things. What are you building? How many homes have you built? And what is that business looking like?
It's looking a lot better now, especially here locally in St. Pete. The biggest problem we had, I think, locally, is that St. Pete was kind of always the redheaded stepchild to Tampa. South,
in terms of new construction?
In terms of new construction and pricing, South Tampa, south of West Shore Boulevard, for the past, for the past 8 years, you were buying $250,000 to $500,000 houses, tearing them down and building and selling them for 1.2. Stuff's been selling for over $1 million down there for 8-10 years, but around here, even 600,000-700,000 for a 2,500 square foot house has always been just out of the freaking question. Well, that's no longer the case anymore in St. Pete. It's just not, and especially with the rising cost of construction. So St. Pete's definitely looking up. We have a huge thirst for teardowns and a huge thirst for land around here, and it's really pushed the price of dirt up to what you see in Tampa, whereas before it was really a speculative play because the market was very, not volatile around here, but it wasn't as, you had tighter margins. I guess that's a better term to say. You always had tighter margins over here, to where just a little flux in the market or interest rates kind of caused panics and things. So it was, you kind of always were skeptical to kind of jump into kind of what the market pricing was for land, whereas now you're not, at least myself, I'm not so hesitant to do that anymore.
And just to clarify, we're talking about the market for raw land and the market for new construction, which kind of operates not independently, but it certainly is a little bit separate from the real estate market as a whole. And I would imagine some of that is because in new construction, what does it take? 9, 10, 12 months to build a house?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what you have in house. If you've got bare land and you've got plans that you've already used before, and you're just kind of recycling that base plan set to the city, you can typically roll about 6 months on that if you've got that set of things. But for instance, like me, trying to do custom plans, that's going to take about 3 months working with an architect on the back and forth. Everybody's backed up and busy right now. That's the way it is. And then getting through the city's another 2. It's running 60 days now to get a permit. So yeah, you're 5 months on due diligence and then another 5 to 6 on the build. So, I mean, yeah, you can plan on maybe 11 months from when you buy it to getting it up, if you're going to do custom,
right?
And not having anything to recycle on it. So, yeah, that's the timeline of things. I've built, first one we put, I built a house my own house back in 2006.
And that's in Kenwood?
That was in Palmetto Park.
Okay.
On 2nd Ave South. And then didn't really build again until 2016, 2017. Put a couple up in Palmetto Park. I think I did 3 down there. 1, 2, 3 in Palmetto Park. And now I've got 1 going up in North Kenwood on 13th Ave. So haven't done too many, but
and these are all custom builds, not necessarily spec homes.
Yeah, they were spec homes from the market that I didn't have a buyer for them going into it, and they were custom in the sense that I didn't have manufactured. Every single one that I did was a different takeoff plan with a different floor plan with a different thing. So I mean, we were doing from scratch, and we did some different cool things. The first one I did was the Grammatica SIPS project, which was a Martin Grammatica's company. We used their wooden SIP project, so we did a frame house there, which was a super high insulated thing. I like building really energy efficient, really tight energy efficient houses. The last house I did, I got just a hair over 1 air change per hour. Minimum code is like 7 or under right now. So I'm building really tight, and I'm building really energy efficient, which I like because prices of electricity are just not coming down. And building that way, one, it keeps people, as if they choose to just be electric, they can go that way. But it also gives the option of going solar. If they want to add solar, they're not going to need as large of a system to power that house because it's not going to be churning, a ton of electricity. So it's kind of good and bad to that, because if your electric bill isn't really high to begin with, the payback on solar doesn't tend to be as great, which is why I'm right now not really. I'd like to include solar in a lot of my houses, but because I'm building so airtight and so energy efficient, there's kind of a negative to that, because I'm spending a lot more for solar when the average electric bill of most of my clients is like barely over $100 in the summer, and that's for like a 1,900, 2,000 square foot house.
That is Very
you know,
impressive. I do have solar, but I do not have a very energy efficient house. And I can remember prior to having solar, during the heat of the summer when you're running the AC 24/7, having $600, $700 electric bills for a 2,400 square foot house. So $100 for a 2,000 square foot, that is pretty tight in terms of energy efficiency.
yeah, and that's just a personal preference. It doesn't really cost that much more to do it that way. I don't know why more people don't. There can be some problems with it. You kind of have to watch out, especially with spray foam and humidity problems and things like that. But we haven't had any problems yet, so knock on wood that we'll keep doing that. But yeah, that's just a preference of how we go about things. But I am looking to kind of phase myself out a little more of the home inspection side of things and go more into building. My daughter's, getting 9 years old now, and this side of the business takes up a lot of time because it's volume based. The home inspection side is volume based, where a spec house is one or two. I can do one or two a year and make as much or more.
Well, and I imagine you're on the road all day long doing home inspections, whereas you're at one job site doing a new build.
Then it's more management side of things. I've got employees, I've got customer service to manage. I got to do payroll, taxes. There's a lot of other juggling things there that when you're just building, you don't really have a lot of those problems. It's just really input output. That's what it is. It's just controlling inflow and outflow of labor and material.
So speaking of that, with the real estate market so hot, and it has been for a couple of years, inventory is so low, a lot of people out there, investors, are looking for alternative ways of investing or getting into the real estate market, such as redevelopment and new construction. How are you finding vacant land? Because we just mentioned there isn't any vacant land in Pinellas County and St. Pete. Are you demolishing existing structures? Is that or just kind of a little bit of both?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of people still finding vacant land. If you're domain homes, you've been established for a while, they seem to get a lot of vacant land, and some other builders do too. I haven't been established that long. I do get calls for things from just being in the inspection side of things. I know a lot of people, so I do get stuff thrown my way. A lot of it tends to be bigger type stuff, like 4 or 5 plots of land infill at a time, to where they want $800,000, $900,000, and it's like, okay, I don't quite have the float to manage that, so I'm kind of more still small scale, to where I'm just doing one-offs at a time. But it's out there. You just kind of have to. I'm not going to give away all my secrets on here to anybody out there listening, but I do have some back end ways that I have kind of gamed the system. I've missed out on some stuff just due to typical market people being stubborn and stupid, but it's out there if you know how to look for it. Just like anything, just like trying to find a wife. How do you find a wife? Well, you got to go look for it. You're not going to find it just sitting at home on your couch. So, but the last one I did was kind of lucky. It just was across the street from my house. I was swimming in the pool one day, and the house caught on fire and it burned to the ground. So that ended up hitting the MLS like 2 days later. We just outbid everybody for it and got it. And there was a certain plus to overpaying for dirt or a tear down in the fact that it was right next door to my house. Yeah, because you don't have so much wasted time in trying to get to and from job sites to meet building inspectors and manage subs and things like that. There's a time value of money, which is more than most people realize. So, but as far as alternative ways to investing, there's a lot of people that have gotten out of the wholesaling game or the flipping game and kind of started doing, I don't know if you're familiar with Andy Buys Houses. He used to be a big wholesaler down on the south side, and he's just doing new construction now. He's just taking vacant dirt and down on the south side and building single family houses down there. And making his money that way, because everything's gotten so tight now with the inventory squeeze. Wholesalers, the margins, the wholesaler margin isn't as bad, but it's the end buyer. If you're flipping houses, the margins are tight right now, whereas they're not tight with new construction. They're just not.
That's an interesting observation. So, and it's a lot of the same skill sets, from some carry over from flipping to new construction.
Yeah, but the only difference is a lot with that is if you don't have your GC license, you're going to end up having to hire a builder. So then they're going to take a cut. I mean, I'm working with an investor that we used to do a lot of inspections for. One of his properties down on 42nd Ave came with a free lot. and he sat vacant for a while. And he now where and again, just kind of relating back to what I said, now where the prices have gone up in St. Pete to where it makes it worthwhile, he's now wanting to build on that. So we're working with him. We'll GC the build for him, and then he'll sell. We'll take our fee for
Sure.
doing the construction, and then he gets the profit because it's LP per square is still way higher than it is cost to build per square. So
Sure.
there's a margin there, and you'll make the profit in that middle ground.
It's a great point. And I think that's another great nugget for investors who are on the call. If you're shopping for investment properties and you come across one, and this isn't uncommon, this house sits on 2 parcels, and there's a vacant lot next door. Maybe it's not even split. It's not even subdivided into 2 lots, but it is a double-sized lot. There's value in that. And if it's zoned right, and if you can, confirm with the city that you can build on it, there are people out there that want your dirt. And so if you have a house with an extra lot, or you're shopping for properties and you find one with some extra land that comes along with it, that's a potential, project and a potential source of capital and equity.
Yeah, or just straight capital. I mean, you could break that off. All you need is a survey. It costs $500. You just break it off and sell it, and you just made yourself, depending on where it is, possibly $200,000.
Yep.
So, and you don't have to lift a finger. So whatever your purchase price is, take it off of that, and now you're looking a whole lot better than you were.
Absolutely. So you make new construction sound like an attractive option, but we hear all the time, especially now, about the challenges facing the construction industry. Supply chain issues, labor shortages, inflation in materials prices, lumber has doubled, and what are you seeing out in the real world in terms of inflation and labor shortages and issues like that in the construction industry?
Yeah, it's not a labor shortage. It's a more work than we can handle shortage. And if you're like me and a lot of businesses, as a good business owner, it's hard to hire people when times are really, really busy and then lay them off when it starts going the other way, because you hate to lay somebody off. You know what that means. They can't pay their rent. They can't pay, like I could have probably hired another inspector when when it hit the fan with COVID. It just, the real estate market went berserk. We were busier the last 2 years than we've ever been the last 6 before that. Even in our busiest year, we just blew by it, leaps and bounds. And we should have hired somebody, but I thought, this isn't going to last forever. This is going to, come
Sure.
back down. And then when you're not busy and it's sitting around, how do you tell that person that's got 2 kids and a wife, hey, sorry, you're out of here. I'd rather keep it lean. And I think that's how a lot of businesses are. They'd rather keep it lean and just focus on what they can than try to get too busy. If you know the story of Olympus Pools, that's what happened to them. They started wanting to do mad amount of swimming pools, and they just got too darn busy and couldn't keep up with the work.
Yeah.
Oversold and couldn't deliver what they wanted. And that's kind of on the bad side. They didn't hire enough people to, do the work that they were selling. So, no, there's not a labor shortage per se. There is in general, as an economy, you could certainly use more quality people that are electricians, plumbers, HVACs, roofers, et cetera. But, yeah, the supply chain crisis is absolutely insane right now. It's the worst thing I've ever lived through in America in my entire life. I don't even recognize this country anymore. The time frame for things is astronomical right now. Your windows used to be 6 to 8 weeks for a custom window set. It's now 24 to 28 weeks out. So you can imagine, when the hell do you buy windows? I don't know. That was my biggest problem. When do I buy windows?
That 6 months in advance.
Is the building department going to approve my permit in 20 days, or are they going to have to do it in 60 days? Because now I know that it's going to take, it screws everything up. So I'm probably at a point now where I'm just going to be left twiddling my thumbs waiting for my windows to come in before I can do next. Yeah, good prices just going up and down left and right. You have no freaking idea when it's going to happen. Like, I had a lumber quote that I've been priced out, 4 weeks ago. Now it went up $13,000 in 30 days. And I thought we were okay on lumber. So apparently we have a tree shortage in America or something right now. I don't know. I was like, look, I'll cut some trees down in the neighborhood and just bring them to the site, and you can mill them there. Because none of it makes any sense to me whatsoever. And I'm a big economist type brain person, but it just doesn't make any freaking sense. I'm not buying any more wood than I was a year ago. I don't know about you. like, but yeah, so it's just, it's crazy.
I suppose it's not the demand for wood. It's just the people and the trucks and
just anything
the
in
labor
general
to get the wood to market. Yeah.
Like,
but it's interesting that these are things you have to think about 6 months in advance if you're doing construction. Is when will I need the windows? If they get here too early, I'm stuck storing a truckload of windows somewhere.
Right, and that's what I'm having to do with my door. I went down to buy my doors yesterday, and they were like, "Well, did we re-quote this?" I'm like, "You just quoted it 6 weeks ago," and he's like, "Well, prices have gone up," and I'm like, "What do you mean they've gone up in 6 weeks?" I'm like, how much more does it cost to build a door now than it did 6 weeks ago?
Right.
So he's like, "When do you think you'll need them by?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know." He's like, "Well, prices are going up in February, they're going up in March, and they're going up in April," they told us. So for the next 3 months, prices are going up. So I was like, "Guess who's buying doors and throwing them in my warehouse?" Me.
Right.
Along with all my ceiling fans, along with all my kitchen cabinets, along with all my light fixtures, along with all my doorknobs, along with all my closet tracking. I bought everything for this house already, and it's sitting in my warehouse stuffed to the gills to the ceiling because I didn't know if it was going to be there, number one, when I need it, which half the stuff that I looked at to get wasn't in stock or wasn't available with no idea when it was. So I was like, well, I better buy what I can find now because there may be less than that. You just don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky juggling that and juggling the timing and the order of operations when you're talking about construction and renovation.
And so that's what's throwing people off right now. And when I have horror stories of people that were like, "Oh, we should be in our house by now," and they're just now getting the BLACA. It's it just is what it is.
Yeah.
That's it's not going to happen fast, I can tell you that.
Sure. Well, we're going to close with some more general questions. And the first one is, where do you see the Tampa Bay real estate market going in the next couple of years? And I love asking people this question because I ask it of people from different walks of life, a wholesale person, inspector, builder, broker. And it's interesting to see whether we're seeing the same things out there.
I'd be interested to hear what other people say once I say my thing.
You first.
Yeah, no, I'll go first. It's looking like we're becoming the next Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if you've been to Fort Lauderdale before. Yeah, that's what it's looking like we're becoming. Or Pompano Beach or any of those little kind of, I don't call them little seaside communities because they're not. They're bigger cities, but we're comparably sized to them. For a long time over here, we weren't. And that's the draw right now. I have lots of investors that we've done stuff for that are moving their money out of Dade County, that are moving their money out of New York, and they're parking it right here in Tampa Bay because everything in Southeast Florida is too expensive. Everything in Southwest Florida is too expensive. Nobody wants to be in Jacksonville. Sorry. And it's coming here. And that's what part of the problem is that we're seeing right now with the lack of everything is that for a long time we were very undervalued for what we have here as compared to a lot of the other metro areas around here. And I think that's what the big draw is. And so unfortunately everybody out there that's the kind of the sad thing that we don't have here or that we haven't gotten yet, but it's becoming that way is better paying jobs. So I think that's what the biggest gripe we've always been more of a service-based economy with, I don't say lower wages, but when comparatively to other areas, sure, we had more of a concentration of just average household income. And we start seeing all this stuff coming up because money's coming in, taking all the supply, and less supply, huge demand, prices going through the
Absolutely.
Roof. And it's still going to go up. That's just what Zillow said. I know they said Tampa's going up, and I don't know if they were talking about Tampa or just the Tampa Bay market, going up another 20% this year. Yeah, there's no doubt. I hate to tell you, even with interest rates coming up, these people are coming down. Not going to say these people, but people are coming from up north and from out west with straight cash money because their stuff out there is worth $800,000-$900,000, and our stuff is still worth $4 or $5. So whatever they're selling, they're bringing straight cash here, and they're buying it straight cash, and that's what you're up against.
Yeah, I think your projection pretty much mirrors the same thing that I talk about, the same thing I talked about with Kate on a previous episode. I found it really interesting, though, that you throw out the comparison to Fort Lauderdale or Pompano Beach, because the other one that's been thrown around is California. Is Florida on the trajectory that California was on 20, 30 years ago? I don't think we'll go that far off the rails, but I think some of the things that we're seeing, the population growth, the demand for housing, and the lack of it's not humanly possible to build enough houses to keep up with that demand. And that's just basic economics. Prices are going to continue to go up because supply can't keep up with demand.
Yeah. Well, and the other problem this place had too was that it never strategically planned for density. It just kept growing radially out from, downtown St. Pete, from Clearwater, and just kept pushing out now until it took all the land. And now we've got to come in and tear what we built down and build deeper density. So that kind of hurts us as well. We don't have any land over here in Pinellas County, whereas Tampa is a little bit more, you can dip into Pasco and things like that where they're still building outward.
Yeah, there's still tract developments out there.
So there's still a lot of good value to find, but you just got to be out to get it. So if you want to be in, you're going to pay for it.
So you touched on this earlier, but where do you see your businesses going in the next couple of years, and what are your professional plans and goals?
Well, the home inspection, I feel like we have a fairly solid reputation around here. I don't think that's going anywhere per se. It's kind of been on cruise control for quite a while. I used to market heavily back when we first started adding employees in 2015, 16, 17, et cetera. It's really been on cruise control. I haven't lifted my pen or spent any money on to do any sort of marketing.
In terms of advertising.
Yeah, in general, in probably 3+ years now. And I don't really expect that to change. So the inspection side of things is fine. My professional plans and goals, like I said, I don't ultimately know what's going to happen with the inspection side of things. That's kind of the scary thing right now for me, as I kind of move through this build that I have here. That's really going to depend. I mean, kind of that's the problem with spec build is you don't know where the market's going. But ultimately, I'd probably like to sunset being involved in really much capacity with the inspection side of things and move towards developing.
Sure. Well, I imagine you can own a home inspection company without being the one who does all the home inspections.
Yeah.
That sounds like a worthy goal to me.
Yeah. And right now I've phased myself out to the point where I really only keep, like a morning appointment 4 days a week. And then pretty much the rest of the day I'm focused on other endeavors. So I'm already to that point now. It's just really about maybe trying to find somebody that wants to fill this shoe and working it out financially to where we can accomplish it and finding the right person. So that's probably down the road, 2020, after 2022. But I've pretty much said that 2022 is going to be my line in the sand demarcation line for being heavily involved with it and maybe trying to find somebody that could fill their shoes and then start doing more construction, which is really what I love. I love building houses and the process of it, and I'm good at it. So, finding more that makes me happy, I think is what I want to do.
That's what it's all about. So the last two are really kind of interrelated. What's one important lesson you've learned over the years, and what's one word of advice, or what are some words of wisdom you'd give to an aspiring real estate investor looking to buy a property in Florida, or more specifically in the Tampa Bay area?
The one lesson that I've definitely learned over the years is nobody's going to cover your ass but you. So whatever that means to whatever you're doing, take that to heart. And nobody's going to care about your problems either. So, whatever you need to do to protect yourself in whatever capacity that's going to be, whether that's purchasing property, doing your due diligence for open permits, for liens, for I don't even know, over in Tampa there's some weird crap with like some lots over there they have that have certain requirements for drainage and things like that. But I'm not even going to get into it now, but it's just weird stuff I've learned over the years. But making sure you do your due diligence. If you're a home buyer, realize what it is you're buying. If you've got old drain lines, get that source scope, get your source lines inspected, because when the plumbers right now are charging $100 a linear foot to replace your line, and it's 60 feet to the city, you're going to be shelling out probably $8 or $9 grand to dig up your backyard and put a new drain line in. And I don't know how many people like just forking over $9 grand for some pipe.
Yeah,
Either that or get
that's the worst thing to spend money on is
either
a
that
sewer
or
line.
Either that or
There's no reward. There's no good feeling of sewer line.
Well, yeah, or either that or get a shovel. And I'll tell you that because I the first house I bought as I don't want to say investor, but it was a house to flip back in 06. I was actually living in it and renovating it while I was living there, and I was still working in the corporate world. So I would work in the evening and I'd work on the weekends doing it. And we moved into that house, had an inspection, and like probably about 30 days later, it started backing up into the bathtub and the shower. And I was like, oh, geez. So we had a camera run down, and the camera went about 6 feet out the back and just hit sand. And we were like, what the hell is going on? Started digging pure Orangeburg down in Lakewood Estates. So got a plumbing quote, was absolutely ridiculous. And I was like, well, what is it if I dig it up and you guys just lay the pipe, pull the permit, and I'll backfill? And it was like ridiculous. It was like $1,000 just to, do the pipe work. So I just rented I know how to drive heavy equipment. So I just rented an excavator and dug it up myself and backfilled it. But, that cost me like $500 for an excavator. But anyway,
somewhere there's a picture of me in my backyard in a hole about that deep.
Mine was deeper than that. Mine was, by the time I hit, because Lakewood Estates, those lots are deep.
Right.
Like those things are like 190 feet deep back there. So by the time I got to the back, in the backyard to where the city pipe was running between the yards, I was probably in a hole about 8 feet deep. Like I was standing in the bottom of that thing and I was looking up at dirt.
And when you say 190 feet deep, you mean the length of the lot from front
the street
to back. So you've got that much pitch. So instead of being at 5 or 6 feet, you're at 8 or 9.
Because everything ran to the back there, so the house was set back.
I just didn't want people to think we were digging down to 190 feet to find our sewer lines.
But anyway, back to what I was saying. Yeah, I mean, just and that was again, I bought an old house with old drain lines, and I didn't do my due diligence there. I could have caught that ahead of time. So. Yeah, and then again, that problem, I wasn't one of those people who's going to go back crying to my home inspector. Why didn't you tell me I have, Orangeburg pipe in my backyard? Well, they can't tell you that. And
Right.
They don't.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to be willing to grab a shovel.
Yeah, he doesn't give a turd. Get a shovel and start digging, or pay somebody to do it. One of the two. So yeah, that's the biggest lesson that I've learned is and that just always carried forward as sage advice to this.
Yeah, and obviously one of the ways that investors can do that, protect themselves and CYA, so to speak, is to hire a good home inspector. And to that front, what's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you or to schedule an inspection or learn more about the services that you offer?
Yeah, we're easily found. We have a well-ranking website with a lot of good reviews. Just ignore the couple bad ones. Those people are nuts. Just search on Google, DG Inspekts. Plenty of websites, plenty of reviews. You can call our office to get availability and pricing. You can always message us from the website.
And it's dgciflorida.com.
dgciflorida.com. Yep, is the main website. We also have one that's like my St. Petersburg home inspector that I bought years ago when I started out, when Google was really heavily tied to city location and what you did keyword searches. So, I mean, if you search us, you may get we kind of have two websites that look very similar, but they're both the same. They both have the same information. They both have all the contact info as well. As far as one word of advice to inspiring real estate investor looking to buy a property in Florida, this is a piece of advice that I heard recently, and I wish I would have heard it years ago, because I've let so many deals as an investor looking for land or teardowns pass me by because I didn't heed this word of advice, and that is the best time to buy real estate or land was yesterday. And man, I can tell you the amount of stuff I've seen come and go through my inbox and stuff because I was nervous or I don't, like if I would have known that or had that sage advice, I'd be in a lot different position than I am. Not different position, but just, would have more things under my belt than I do now, because that advice is what it is. The best time to buy it is yesterday, because it just doesn't get any cheaper. Yep. It may for a little bit, but it doesn't.
Not over the long term. And I think once you've been around and in this business for a while, it's hard not to drive around town and be like, oh, I should have bought that one. Oh,
Yeah.
why didn't I buy that one? Oh, I should have bought that one.
Yeah.
And it's just the nature of the business, I think. Well, Glenn, thank you very much for being on today. I think we covered some incredibly valuable information for our listeners, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
Sounds good.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Copeland Morgan Media Real Estate Podcast. As you can imagine, producing this great educational content takes a lot of effort and commitment on our part. We only ask one thing in return. Please subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast app or by visiting copelandmorgan.com/podcast. And remember, there's no greater compliment than referring us to a friend or colleague. Until next time, I'm Jeff Copeland.